The Sacramento Kings have made us a Sacramento Kings adjacent podcast of late, Grant. They fired Mike Brown, and they didn't ruin a podcast we recorded, but they were annoying enough to do it like 60 minutes after we finished recording.
Yeah.
What are just your thoughts on the state of the Kings? We know now that Doug Christie, interim head coach, we've had the comments from De'Aaron Fox and everybody else since then. How are you feeling about the Kings, their decision is to fire Mike Brown, their direction? Like, just where are you at with this whole situation?
I still feel like we haven't gotten a what you would call like a sufficient explanation yet in situations like this. Usually it would have come out by now. And there's been plenty written, but usually it would be fairly clear that, and this didn't happen, that De'Aaron Fox and his representation said, like, as a condition of me considering staying here on my next deal, you got to get a new coach. Like, I mean, and this didn't specifically happen in Cleveland, for example, but it did seem like that core was kind of out on Bickerstaff, and moving on from him was just sort of like, nobody was upset about that. It didn't seem like among the players there. So we haven't gotten that report. We haven't gotten that Brown lost the locker room. So all that's kind of implied and like seemingly priced in. And so where that leaves me is that it was like a capricious decision by an owner that has made a lot of those, right? Like that feels like the cleanest explanation, but we haven't gotten like really explicit reporting. I know Ramona Shelburne had some recently about, there was decided at the top, I think, but we haven't gotten anything that satisfies me. Like, even though I do think, it just was Vivek Ranadive, getting his 8th coach in 12 years or whatever it is. I think it's like 8-13 or 8-12 or something like that. Is that where
Seems
you
low,
land?
to be honest?
It does, right? There was a minute there, like the Tyrone Corbin era, like George Karl, Tyrone Corbin, Dave Yeager used to coach here. Does anybody remember that? It wasn't that long ago. Is that how you feel though? Where it's like, we haven't gotten like the smoking gun yet, but it's like, it just seems like the simplest explanation is ownership made a hasty decision.
Yeah, and I think that's accurate. Based the Shelburne piece, it was clearly there was a ton of great information there. It was great reporting by Ramona, but it read like the front office and ownership trying to do damage control or get their side of the story across, and it was so inept at doing so. Or I would say it did so, but do you know what the messaging was coming out of that piece? That the organization basically was saying, we didn't really know what to do, so we fired Mike Brown.
Yeah, kind of, right? And it also seemed like, I mean, well, not only did we not know what to do, we didn't want to do this. Like, like that was the vibe that I got from players, and to even like maybe McNair. Like it wasn't the headline like nobody wanted to fire Mike Brown or something like that.
They also tried to use the extension talks as cover for, but like they were on the fence kind of about it before they signed him to his 3-year extension. Mm-hmm. It's like, that just makes you look fucking stupid because you signed him to an extension anyway and then made the call less than halfway through the season. I think, and De'Aaron Fox, I know a lot of people speculated before the Shelburne piece and then before he came out and posted his, social media rebuke, that he was the reason Mike Brown got fired. And I'm just so over there was a video of them talking at practice the day that Mike Brown got fired. So it was really De'Aaron Fox that did it. And it's also probably not Mike Brown telling De'Aaron Fox to request a trade. And this isn't an insult to De'Aaron Fox, who in any given season can and has made an all-NBA team. Mm-hmm. That's not a player who is good enough to get his head coach fired.
Well, not on a normal team, but it is the Kings. What I would note. So like they, take what they can get in that regard. I don't know, small flex. I've talked to De'Aaron Fox a couple times, like over the years, and he just doesn't seem like that guy. Like, and maybe that's, you never know. I can't like, because I know him really well. No, like I just, I do think it would really surprise me if it was like a strong arm, like him or me move by him. Like that never squared to me as something that was like logical.
You also haven't had from Mike Brown's camp the counter report when De'Aaron Fox said, we never argued and I asked him to coach me hard. We haven't heard anything counter to that. And so that by the way, not that anyone necessarily gave Mike Brown endorsement, but the closest I saw to a player saying this was the right call was like Malik Monk saying like it was time for a change. It's like Malik Monk is just like out on Mike Brown. I understand the impetus to make a change. This is the easiest change to make rather than investing more first round equity in trades or whatever. And I don't think he coached this team perfectly. The Keon Ellis stuff is beyond maddening. And I won't pretend to have seen every Kings game, but there's the inconsistent usage of him. And like, why is Malik Monk starting instead of Keon Ellis when Keon Ellis is probably your best defense? Like, Keegan Murray's your best all-around defender, but like Keon Ellis could have made Keegan Murray's life a lot easier. But I'm seeing a lot of people look at Keegan Murray's struggles and kind of blame the approach that Mike Brown is taking to the offense. This is the conversation we had when we supported the DeRozan move in a vacuum by saying, just for the value, you probably do it. But what did you think was going to happen to Keegan Murray on offense when you have Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, De'Aaron Fox, and Domantas Sabonis in there? No, you didn't expect him to shoot sub 0% from three. But when you look at his true usage stuff, which is just basically a measure of everything he's doing on offense, it's night and day compared to last year. And so you marginalized probably the third most important player in the organization. If not, some people might make the argument for second. That's not on Mike Brown. That's a function of the roster that this front office put together. And when we got to talking about the Kings, you and I are actually a little bit more optimistic on could they fix this than the consensus, believe it or not, just based off things I've read and watched, listened to, whatever. But like, they've needed the same things for multiple seasons running now, where you could say, oh, they also needed a shot creator and they went out and got that. But you got a shot creator who doesn't elevate your defense, doesn't elevate your spacing. And we're talking once again about like they could really use a backup four or backup big and then like another combo wing. This is year 3 of saying that.
Yeah. Where do you think this leaves them? Like, is it because I don't think things will like Doug Christie, who knows? Maybe he'll get the bump of like, okay, the assistant coach we all like is in charge now. We're going to play for him. Like maybe I just don't think he's going to be like a meaningful plus. And so is a trade coming now? Are we going to see McNair go next? And then the Kings get back into that cycle that just torpedoed them for years of where you fire a coach, you keep the executive. Then you hire a new coach, but you fire that executive and put a new executive in that didn't hire this coach, and you just never have them synced up. That was one of the beauty parts. It's just like, what do you do? What's the next step for this team?
It should be, honestly, if we're being honest, Grant, the actual blunt take is De'Aaron Fox is going to get traded. I don't think it's going to happen this season, but it's going to happen over the offseason. That's where this is now headed, because I think that they've continued to make, even if they're not the wrong moves in a vacuum, they haven't made the right moves.
Yeah.
And I know that Monty McNair has received a lot of praise for how he's built this roster. He deserves like the Kings finding Keon Ellis and like giving Malik Monk a home and expanding his role from where he was with the Lakers. The Sabonis trade has worked out well for the Kings. Just like so much of this is just kind of luck. Like he hasn't, none of his, like if the Domas was his biggest swing, and I suppose that's worked out, but you're also at a point where it's, well, now your most important player might not want to re-sign with you, even though I still think a lot of that has to do with just how the financials line up.
Yeah.
I don't know what comes next. I assume this is going to end poorly because it's the Kings. And Tom Ziller for Good Morning It's Basketball had a great piece, like a breakdown of it. And he even said, if this follows the typical Kings trajectory, De'Aaron Fox isn't going to get moved over the offseason. He's going to get moved before the trade deadline because he's going to a Vaxxer out. And I don't know if that was that was speculation on his part. Maybe it was informed speculation, but that does seem like I would be a little bit surprised if it happened before the trade deadline, although maybe he'll ask for out. That just seems like where this is headed, because the franchise doesn't seem like it has a coherent vision in place. And very quickly, a coaching change mid-season, at the end of the season, whatever, to me, it should only be made if you know or can think that there's a better alternative out there right now.
Yeah.
What about Doug Christie's very short stint as an assistant coach makes you think that this is the answer? There are other veterans on this staff that could have gotten the reins. So what did they see in Doug Christie that makes them think this was the right move or an upgrade, or that he can steward this team for the rest of the year? And then is it Doug Christie? Like, who is the coach that like you think is going to do better for this roster than Mike Brown?
Yeah, this is always the problem when you find, and it's doubly problematic because Mike Brown's won Coach of the Year twice. Like that, he's not like you guess you're not going to find a 3-time winner out there that's like happy to now. Like the Coach of the Year thing is crazy, and we've talked about how like sort of silly it is year to year. But
except for Tibbs,
Teflon. Yeah. But you're not going to do better. Like you're going to do different. Like, and that seems like what the point was here was we just need a different voice, I guess. Like just things aren't working.
Just like Is that even been? I didn't really notice it in the Shelburne piece. I think Ziller mentioned it in his, and we always tangentially say like maybe the players were tuning him out, or
Right.
like you said, needed a different voice. That hasn't even been part of the messaging. I've more so seen league sources say like you can't criticize your team like that. But meanwhile, De'Aaron Fox is saying everything Mike Brown has said publicly about us, he tells us to our faces. And so I'm not saying Mike Brown was perfect. This just, what was the line? And I quoted it, from Ziller. The thing about the Kings under Ranadive is that everyone, well, almost everyone, is a mood swing away from being fired. And that just seems like what happened here. Unless you think Mike Brown is, they have other issues, but among their biggest issues is their crunch time record. They've played more minutes of crunch time than any other team, and they've lost so many games in that they've blown leads. If you think he's responsible for that, okay, fine. That's not even part of like the justification that's being spun here.
Right. That's what I mean. That's the circle. That's a good place to end it, which is where we started it, with me saying like, I'm just unsatisfied by any explanations that have been out there. And it does just, I think that's dead right, is that, it just comes down to the owner just made a like kind of hasty, not that well thought out decision. And that is that was the norm until Mike Brown was there. Like that's the thing. Like this, what we saw the last couple years was the exception to the rule. And we're kind of back to the rule now. And that should be very concerning if you're a Kings fan, I think, because
I was just gonna say that's a great nutshell of the entire discussion.
We're back to the rule. Not a good place.
It feels like this team can probably be salvaged. It won't be because of how things are run in Sacramento.
Yeah.